Bring on the grand final. St Kilda, after so many years in the wilderness, are in the grand final.
Crows are in the grand final. I can't see their faces, only the shadows of their eyes. I'm going where the sun keeps shining through the pouring rain.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this special edition of Talking Footy. I hope you enjoyed the previous program. That was the season that was. Leigh and I have made the trek from there. And Mike has joined us. Leigh, that was a good show, wasn't it?
And discarded the jacket. Much more casual here we are.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Actually, Mike, looking at the Saints and the Crows after round 6, the Crows were 13th and the Saints were 15th. What an unlikely match-up in a grand final.
Amazing, isn't it? It is exciting, but it is amazing. I can't remember a year where the two grand finals have come from oblivion like these two have.
Gives great hope for the teams that didn't make it this year, I think, because it really, I think, just proves this evenness of the competition. We talk about all the time that there's not that much difference between the bottom group and the top group.
All attributable to the salary cap and the draft, do you think, or is it a bit fluky?
Oh, partly that. I think the draft hasn't yet hit completely. I think it's probably another 5 years. I mean, these sides are made up of a lot of players that didn't come through the national draft. So I think it's even a few more years before the draft completely hits as a mechanism.
I think the bookmakers got it right. Earlier this week they had St Kilda at 4-1 on. They're now, I think, out to 3-1 on, with the Crows at 2-1. That's a lopsided market. Is that the truth, do you think? I mean, we've got one team who's won 16 out of 19 and the other's won 14 out of 19.
Yeah. I don't think in any two-horse race, particularly a grand final, the disparity's too great, I think. Don't you?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I'd say it's 55 or 60 to St Kilda. I think St Kilda should be favourites logically, but it's maybe 60-40 or 55-45. That's more reasonable percentages, I would have thought.
What about match time, Mac? How do you think that what will the odds be at the bounce?
It'll close, I think. I think the longer the week goes on, the more chance you get
Usually
to Adelaide.
Does. When you get to the preliminary finals, or it used to be the old days when the probably the team that had made the grand final and hadn't played preliminary final day was always favourite. And then as the week goes on, you seem to build a case for both sides that have actually made the grand final.
Maybe two's on 6-4. Look, everybody's very sad about Nicky Winmar. His dad passed away today. Apparently Nicky was told during a team meeting tonight at Moorabbin.
Told during a team meeting?
I think so, and taken them aside and then turned around to the players and said, look, this is what's happened. You know, Dad's died. So we are all feeling for him tonight.
Yes, we are. It's just it'd be intriguing to see what this pressure does to him tomorrow. I mean, he's an emotional guy anyway, Nicky Winmar, isn't he?
Well, whenever I suppose, real life interferes with sport, or vice versa, I suppose. I mean, it's a real life tragedy. The football part of it, I suppose, is obviously very, very secondary. But it's sort of a parent dying sort of the day before the grand final. It's the whole mix of emotions there.
We've got Michael Malthouse as our special guest, and we're delighted to have him, the only man to have won 2 premierships as a coach in the 1990s. Malcolm Blight and Stan Howes were in good form, weren't they?
They were.
On Monday night.
Rare body language for two grand final coaches, wasn't it?
This was after the Brownlow medal. They, I think, were reminiscing a bit about those old times at North Melbourne. And I still had the feeling they were pinching themselves and thinking, gee, we're lucky to be here. We didn't think we'd be here at the start of the year. Let's just go back and just relive a couple of the funny moments from Monday night after the Brownlow with the 2 premiership, or 2 grand final coaches. They both won't come away with a premiership.
Malcolm, are you going to play the 3 talls?
Is Robert Harvey and Nathan Burke and Stewie Lowe going to all play, all those blokes?
Yeah, we're playing halves in the ruck. Okay. Combat you there, so I think he will. I mean, I'm saying that in the hope that you'll say, well, I won't do it now.
Every now and then.
Leigh, I mean, just if you were coaching against a guy you played with at Hawthorn, can you imagine yourself doing that sort of thing?
I think potentially. I mean, it shows the bond between premiership teammates, to be honest. I mean, Stan and Malcolm haven't had a great deal to do with the same clubs in the last 20-odd years, but they shared the premiership memories, and is actually 2 premiership teammates ever coached against each other in the grand final?
It was happened once before, a long time ago. Only once before.
Do you know who they were?
Tell me.
No.
Put you on the spot now.
Dan Minogue.
Yep.
And Checker Hughes.
There you go. Well done.
Checker Hughes, they were quite big names, yeah.
What about the big 3 that have retired this week?
Look, I can't remember a week where 3, and they are, look, icons is an overused word, but 3 guns like these have all left in the space of 72 hours.
Well, you can say that. I mean, Gary Ablett, I mean, I've never seen a player be able to do all the things that he can do, and obviously has done it so often. This particular day here, I mean, just the pace and the acceleration. He was a bit lighter, Gary, probably than he was in the middle 90s, but just every skill in the book he had.
Certainly the most electrifying player I've seen, Bruce.
Yeah, I mean, Malcolm has been asked a lot as his former coach, hasn't he, Malcolm Brighton? He said offensively he was the most devastating player. This day at Waverley, when he kicked 8 in the preliminary final, he was unbelievable. I mean, in the grand final he got 9.
No, but I've always said, in my mind, no doubt that was his best performance, I think. He was flawless that day.
There's no doubt he has got the longest highlight tape of any player that's ever played. There's no doubt about that.
So his legacy will live on as one of the greatest players ever.
The concern now is what he does with the rest of his life. And I don't mean to be melodramatic about it, but I just hope that he just actually does get back on track, and that people are there to counsel him about that he's got another 50 years to live.
That's it.
He is a very controversial figure in more ways than one. Greg Williams on the field, there's been very few more controversial than Diesel. I mean, he's probably not quite the star that Gary was, but he's probably in the same league, isn't he?
I don't think there's any... Well, maybe there's an Ablett league. Maybe that's a special category.
There's not too many in that category.
But under that, if you put Ablett in a class of his own, this bloke's as good as the rest of them.
This was his last match, by the way, he ever played.
And I think we've seen the kick and the handball, the ability to set up a just precise disposal, weight the kick or the hand pass to the absolute advantage of the teammate. That's what he just did so well.
His hands were always great. I think he improved his kicking, don't you? He got more depth and more power in his...
Well, and obviously he ended up being able to kick just as well left side as right side. But, I mean, his ability, of course, to win the ball in heavy traffic in the middle of packs, I mean, he was just a fantastic crumbing player. The ability to read the ball off hands in the marking contest or just in the ruck work was just fantastic.
What about that ability to rise to the occasion? Ablett had a super grand final in 89 and then struggled a bit, didn't he, in the 90s in big finals. Williams in that big one in 95 won the Norm Smith kick 5 from a pocket basically in the end. That ability to rise.
Yeah, well, he did. I mean, he was a great... all the champions are great competitors, aren't they?
Not every champion plays brilliantly in big matches, though.
Well, he's probably not a champion then if he doesn't play it in big matches.
That's a fair point, but a lot of top players over
the years... I have this query on Jarman, who's as talented as probably any bloke we've just seen, but the query on him is his ability to do it when it has to be done. Now, he might actually elevate his reputation tomorrow, but at the moment he hasn't done it often enough when the heat's on. That's my view about him.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair point at this stage of his career. I think that most people would make that observation.
He's 30, so he probably won't get a lot more chances than tomorrow. Stephen Kernahan, who announced his retirement today. I mean, Greg Williams...
This is one of my favourites. I mean, this is the game Carlton and Essendon with the scores, I think.
This is his bloopers tape.
But this is Stephen Kernahan. No champion player can be as erratic as what Sticks was. But the very next week, in the same circumstances, he kicked the goal that won the game.
Well, that's what he had the ability to do, just to kick the goal that counted and usually float them through at all kinds of funny, wobbling kind of angles. But they seem to go through. But this one here, taking the front position and marking strongly just from the overhead ball in the almost 50-50 contest. That's almost his hallmark.
He did that for 10 years, didn't he?
Well, he did. Remember, he kicked the 10 goals against Bruce Steele for South Australia before he even came to Carlton, and I think everyone knew he was pretty special from that point onwards.
You ran into him today, Michael, didn't you?
I did. Walking down Collins Street, we were both going to different lunches, and he said he was going to the Carlton lunch and there was something going to be said, and I said, have you made your decision? Or any decision? He said, I made that decision 6 months ago. Now, to me, that unravelled the mystery about why he was so angry about the stories that you and I wrote, because I think he said, this is in place, I know what I'm doing, and here are two guys trying to tell me what I should do.
Can we ask the question of why now rather than, say, 3 weeks ago at the end of the season then?
Well, you can ask, I don't know the answer to that, but I think he played unfit against Richmond in the last game because he knew that was it. Now, he clearly shouldn't have played that day.
He did a press conference today and he talked about a lot of the memories and the great times and talked about the lasting ones for him.
The main thing I want to do is to finish on my own accord. I've seen a lot of mates from Adelaide and Carlton have to be told, and I think Diesel and I, something I wanted to get right was to, we had the option that we could play on and train and play next year. The club support us with that, they've been great. But, I want to go out being remembered as, pretty good players at the end of the day. So I've known for quite a while what I'm doing.
And Stephen Silvani will stay at Carlton?
Yes. I don't think there was ever any doubt that he would stay there. I mean, they couldn't afford to lose Silvani. The question was whether the wedge that John Elliott seemed to be driving between Sylvania and Carlton might become that big that, you know, it would cause a standoff. But that's good news for Carlton. But I think there are more guys around the 30 years of age mark that will be having an anxious weekend.
Gary Ablett and Stephen Kernahan and Greg Williams will be part of a parade tomorrow. Greg and Stephen are going to be in with Justin Madden in the same vehicle, and Gary's going to be in with Paul Catch, and there are other players involved.
Have the Carlton players agreed to do it, have they?
Yeah.
Has there been a qualification for that? For instance, have they said any player who retires who's played 200 games,
No.
or is it just a random selection?
It's random
by
at the moment.
AFL?
This came up when the issue was being debated that Darren Pritchard, I don't think, was in the original intake. Because they didn't have criteria, but they should set criteria, I think.
I think so. It's automatic rather than random, but I mean, it might be less. 150 games, who cares? But for the players to have a chance to be applauded after retirement on grand final.
I'm looking forward to that. I think it's really good. I mean, Chris Langford will be there. I mean, they're genuine greats of the game, these players.
I think drawing the line on games is a problem because some people impact in 80 games more than some people do in 300. That's the problem you might have.
But then if you become subjective about it, I mean...
Well, how many games did Coleman play?
Yes, but if you
98.
There's got to be some kind of benchmark. Otherwise, you'd have 100 players out there.
Who's missing? Who's missing from the Saints and the Crows? The only time they played at Football Park this year when Adelaide won narrowly. Well, for St Kilda, out Everett, Smith, and Young. I'm going to pick a three, and in Daniels and Hall and Keogh and Neil a bit, have come back. Now look at Adelaide, 7 changes. A lot of changes, aren't they, for both teams? No Modra, no Rasciuto, no Vardy, no Stanfield, 3 of their big goal kickers. In Smart at the bottom, who's important. Rintoul, Keating, James. Big changes, aren't they, to both teams? Who's best off because of that, do you think?
I think it's probably hurt St Kilda a bit more. They're 3 guns that they're going to, aren't they?
Yeah, Everett. I know he hasn't been playing well, but Modra, Rasciuto and Vardy was a fair bit of the Crows' goal-kicking power, and I think they're struggling to replace them.
Modra has kicked 13 goals in 8 weeks.
Well, certainly has recently, I agree. But, I mean, that's why the Crows' goal-scoring has probably dropped to your 10s and 12s as well.
Speaking of which, the 100-point factor, which has been a good barometer this year for both teams. St Kilda's kicked 100 points, that's 15-10 or 14-16 or whatever, 15 times this year, and they've won 14. They've done 6 of the last 7 they've actually managed that. Look at the Crows. When they get to 100 points, they basically win every time. Yet in their last 7 matches, they haven't managed to kick 100 points yet, not once.
But they do have the best defence in the competition. I mean, they've broken the West Coast stranglehold on that title of being the best defensive team in the competition.
It's interesting, Malcolm Blight, when he was at Geelong, had the gun forward line, and maybe it was the fragile defence, certainly in scoring statistics, but this year it's the Adelaide defence that seems to be the strength of their side, if you would want to.
You might get an argument with that, saying they're still the best defence. Look, Michael will be on shortly, Mickey Malthouse.
Always look forward to talking to Mick.
Where have they come from? I mean, you talked about teams coming from the blue. Just look at the last 3 years. We picked these because this is how long Stan's been at St Kilda. 13, 14, 10. And the Crows have been 11, 11, 11. We've never had 2 teams double digits, have we, come together for grand final?
I wouldn't have thought so. No.
Amazing. Right, we're going to take a break. We've got a lot to talk about as we analyse the 1997 grand final. As I said at the start, who better to do it with than Michael Malthouse, who's taken West Coast into 8 final series in 8 years and 2 grand finals in the 90s. Here's a moment he'll remember at the end of the 1994 grand final.
A long road to the MCG and his second premiership. The Eagles are premiers for the second time in 3 seasons. No debate. They've won in the most convincing style.
Hear a word they're saying. Everybody's talking at me. Don't hear.
This 7 News Update brought to you by Colonial.
Good evening. The Prime Minister calls it his 7 horrible days. The Travel Rorts affair has claimed a 3rd minister, also out 2 Howard advisors. A Garuda passenger jet has crashed in Indonesia with more than 200 on board. The Army has dismissed charges against 2 officers over the Black Hawk disaster. And it's only a game, but it's the wrong weekend to tell footy fans that. Details coming up in the news.
What'd you get?
Rabbit food. Again.
Me too. I think mine's still growing. You blokes want something from the shop? You bloody ripper.
Bloody unreal.
4 and 20. The taste Australians swear by.
Dactarin, now available in a no-mess spray. Dactarin kills the 2 bugs that cause tinea.
Hyundai invites you to their 200,000 sales celebration.
Lantra SE Sports Wagon just $20,990. Lantra SE Sedan just $19,990. Both drive away, power steering, free air conditioning,
and Hyundai's 3-year warranty. Celebrate now.
You've earned a break. You've earned a refreshing, ice-cold breaker.
Hello. My name's John Harker. What's your name? You okay?
Sharon.
Hello, Sharon. This is the Nappy Sand Plus Doorstep Challenge. You wouldn't happen to have anything out in the laundry that we could get clean for you, would you?
I'll have a look. I've got heaps of kids and I wash every day, and what I can't get out in the wash, I just end up having to throw away.
Have you got anything that you were planning on throwing away?
Hang on, let me just see. I found something.
Is this sliding into first, is it?
uniform. I've tried soaking it.
Yeah, but you haven't tried
I haven't tried Nappy Sand Plus on that, no.
How about we leave this with you?
All right.
Well, Sharon, how did we go?
I really didn't think that the Nappy Sand Plus would get the stains out, but they've done a really good job.
It looks now as if he might grow out of them before he wears out of them. That's something. There's no question, if it's worth saving, it's worth Nappy Sand Plus.
This offer could be a lifesaver. Replace your shock absorbers with 4 new Pettis shocks and we'll give you a $35 electronic wheel alignment free. Get your free wheel alignment at Pettis Suspension right here.
Want some real action Saturday nights?
Get out of here.
Then you want Murphy.
Tell me something.
Eddie Murphy.
How you doing? I don't think cost is the issue here, sir. I think the issue should be my blatant disregard for proper procedure. You damn right.
There's Rosemond.
It's Rosewood, sir. You're all under arrest!
And even Paul Reiser.
That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Beverly Hills Cop. The action starts 8:40 Saturday on 7.
Welcome back to Talking Footy. As you can see, Michael Malthouse has joined Leigh and Mike on the couch. So, Mickey, welcome.
Thank you, Bruce.
You've been in Melbourne all week, haven't you? Enjoying it all?
Soaking it up, bit of pressure off, and saying to Michael before that you can't go anywhere in Melbourne now without running to someone in regard to football. So it's not hard to do some planning in regard to recruitment and player suggestions and so forth. So, yep.
Mick, this is almost like Victoria versus South Australia tomorrow. I mean, is there any possibility that St Kilda will have a sort of negative psychological... Will there be negative psychological baggage for them?
I think, Michael, that having a coach side that comes over and plays in a grand final, the pressure that you feel is all week until you get on the plane and you leave all the pressure behind you. So I think that the Crows, as much as the supporters would mount a fair drive on the pressure situation, would have been diminished by the time they got across to Melbourne. And I reckon that all the pressure now is mounted onto St Kilda because they are representing Victoria.
Is that something of the reversal of, say, the home state advantage is an advantage up to grand final when then this kind of principle may turn it a fraction?
Yeah, I do. I think that's a fair point. I think the ground is a very neutral ground because there's going to be a lot of neutral people there, one way or the other, who just want to go and see a good grand final and will applaud both sides. And having seen having been here for most of the week and seeing the news very much all St Kilda, I just feel that the pressure really does. They are expected to win, and if things start to get a bit tight, the expectations may get to them earlier than what it would with the Adelaide players.
You're surprised how extravagant Stan's been with their time. I mean, the access to the St Kilda blokes has been amazing. The media's been able to talk to whomever they want, whenever they want. Are you surprised by that?
Somewhat. Each coach handles it differently. We wouldn't be as liberal, I wouldn't have thought.
Neither would I, Mick.
Because finally we've got the one team town, haven't it? St Kilda this week, and the only team still in the competition in Melbourne, as you own Perth.
And because St Kilda haven't won for 30 odd years, they are going to get a lot of other people siding with them, and that will add to the intensity or the pressure.
Mick, we talk about players having been there and done it, and only Darren Jarman has got grand final experience playing tomorrow, so it's pretty even with the players, but it's not with the coaches.
No, it's not.
Stan's going for the first time as a coach. Malcolm has got this incredibly good record of the 4th in 7 years. Does that give Blighty any edge over Stan Alves?
Well, I think it does. It may only be a marginal percentage, but at the end of the day, it may not tell at all, but the beginning of the game, it's very easy during the course of the week to be buoyant and have the training run according to plan. You walk across that MCG for the first time in a grand final, and the ball bounces and the players are a bit edgy. You have to make the right decisions very early, very much the right decisions, and Malcolm has been there 3 times before.
Interesting point on that one. Of course, Norm Goss, who's Chem selectors now at St Kilda, was in the coach's box many times when Hawthorn win the grand finals back there, the late 80s, early 90s. Whereas the support staff of Malcolm haven't been there before on grand final day. So I wonder if the box as a average might even it up in that regard, the experience factor.
Well, you know as well as I do, you've got to control it yourself as a senior coach. And I just think that you set the tone. And at the end of the day, the chairman selectors is a very good shoulder to lean on, but the decisions have got to be made so crisp and so clean early. And the players have got to make decisions, but the coaches have got to make very important ones early in a grand final.
The Saints are now evens and the Crows are odds on, by the way. There's been a big shift.
All these St Kilda supporters out there are slitting their wrists, you know that.
They've turned off. They're going to wait for the marathon in a moment. Let's look at midfield. We'll have a look at the 2 teams and the keys. Leigh, is this the way you expect they'll line up?
Well, the producers gave me this task of reading the minds of the 2 coaches, so I've actually had a go at putting players in the way I maybe start them, what I know of them from the outside. I suppose you start with the ruck situation there. I mean, I think that even though Wren is probably the gun for the Crows, I suspect they may start Pittman. Wren will certainly be in there at some point of time. St Kilda will start Cook there, obviously, that you would think almost certainly.
We'll get on to Wren a bit later. What about Harvey-Costa situation? I mean, Michael, your thoughts on Harvey? I mean, how would you try and match this phenomenon almost that he's become?
He's just terrific for a start. I think he's one of the most humble players playing. It's just terrific to see a player who's very much worthy actually win it. How do you handle him? Well, we've had some success. In fact, probably the best we've ever done was with Braden Lyle. Now he's at Port. But I think that the player is going to get a lot of the football, and whether you play him at 2 ends of the ground, whether you play someone that can work with him one way and then pick him up on the way through, so perhaps you use 2 players.
Did Lyle chase him around that day
He did.
Zone him up a bit?
Well, no, he chased me around because he's got great recovery power, so he's able to get over it, and he had a fairly good game. But I mean, there is a suggestion that they may work one way with him up to a certain point and catch him on the way through, therefore you're double teaming him and just see if you can limit. I don't think you're going to stop Harvey getting a lot of the football, but what you can do is maybe put him under pressure so that it's not as effective as normal.
Mick, what about the North Melbourne tactic that was employed on Greg Williams, where they rotated 3 players for 10 minutes each quarter?
Well, that could be the case, except this bloke here can run all day and run reasonably quickly all day. Greg's wasn't the quickest. He was certainly able to cover the ground, but not as quickly as Marco.
It's those 50 metres.
Harvey.
The 50-metre surges that leave the average runner 20 metres behind. That's the problem, wasn't it?
I would say that this player here would have the best lateral movement. I was told the other day, what do you mean? And he said, this bloke said to me, I think it's torque. It's called torque. So he's probably got the best torque of any player I've seen. He's just so strong through the hips that he moves laterally so quickly with the ball that he breaks all his tackles. He gets caught, but he breaks them.
And if he does, his hands are clear anyway, aren't they? Exactly. All they're doing is grappling his hips.
You spoke to him about that on Monday night, whether he actually practiced that, and he basically said it came pretty naturally. Let's go back to the midfield, Jarman, who we've talked about already today. Are you thinking that he'll play midfield?
Well, yeah, I am, I must say. I mean, he went forward last week in the last quarter and kicked a couple of goals, but so many times you do things during a game that work for half a game. You say, we'll start him there next week. But, I mean, we'll get to the Crows forward line later. But I've been inclined to think they may start him up in the midfield. Jarman.
Jarman for you. If you were Malcolm, where would you start him? First 5 minutes for him could be pretty important in this final.
Well, he's a pinch hitter, and he can go to a lot of positions and be very damaging. Full forward, it's going to be very hard position to cover him at full forward if you got the St Kilda backline the way it is. Certainly, I agree with Leigh that he will probably start in the centre, but he's got the capacity to go to the forward line and really worry the types of players that could go in.
That's why I punted that Daniels may be his direct opponent and go wherever he goes. I mean, he'll just be one-on-one in the midfield, and if Jarman goes forward, well, Zilla or Peckett can usually go up to a wing. So, I mean, I think, or to the midfield.
Do you think we're harsh on him? I mean, we think he's a genius who controls his own destiny, really. I mean, is he so much above so many other players? Does his temperament, do you think, at times let him down? I mean, Mike, you said you felt it was crunch time a bit for him tomorrow in terms of elevating himself to the greats.
I've felt that for some time. I've been a critic of his, but I think no one plays the game better. No, I haven't seen anyone execute the skills of football better than Darren
Partly
Jarman.
the difference between the best and the worst, I think.
Yeah,
That's what people comment on. His best so good, but he can have bad days and has them, reasonably regularly.
My boys back in Perth will understand what I say here. I think he's another Mark Waugh.
Yeah, good analogy. Yep.
You actually got him sent from the ground in the 91 grand final when you were getting thrashed in the end.
Yep.
You had him
got
sent
beaten badly, yeah.
He did, and he's only grand final.
He's a great player. I think the other real key to the St Kilda midfield is Aussie Jones. I mean, the third quarter last week, when St Kilda really had their surge, Aussie Jones had about 10 kicks, and I think that Connell did a pretty good job on Johnson, who fills a similar role for the Bulldogs. So just maybe Connell will be given the specific role on Jones, because if Jones gets 20 possessions, he's got such penetration with his run and his kicking that St Kilda forwards are going to get quick opportunities.
Connell, you'd know pretty well. I mean, he's done well in Adelaide. It took a while to get back in. He struggled last year. Malcolm didn't play him straight away this year. Has he got good endurance? Because he showed he had a fair bit on Saturday. He's going to need a lot with Jones.
Oh, yes, he has. He has got fair endurance. He can. He was a ruck rover type player at Subiaco and with the Eagles. I just suspect that he may not have the leg speed to go with Jones. I think young Sampson's got extreme pace. Now, whether they want to try the young fella on a... well, even Jones is fairly young, but he's got a bit more experience.
Yeah.
I think that match-up, you're putting pace on pace.
Pace, Mickey?
That's right. And Scott is not slow.
No.
Whereas Matthew Connell, I don't say slow, but he does. His pace is not what Jones would be. Mind you, not many people would have the pace of Jones.
Mick, the weather conditions, would either coach be concerned about the prospect of a heavy track? It won't be heavy, but say wet. So
well, I don't think Adelaide are, because they've only brought 21 players over. So it looks like they're going to go in for what they've brought over.
Gee, there's huge rumours today that they'll fiddle with it and that Tregenza might
The fact
play.
there's only 21 over might make those rumours even stronger, because you thought you would bring one or two over just for the sake
But
of
you can sneak a player into Melbourne, Michael. Brendan Fuster. That was a good effort 2 weeks ago.
Well, it's
How do you do it? How do you sneak one in?
with great difficulty. Let me tell you, with great difficulty. No, I think Malcolm's done. I think Malcolm is one of the straightest coaches you'll come across. If he says that you're going to play 21, generally, I'd say 100% of the time he will pick his 21. That's the 21.
I've done a fairly illogical thing with my team, I've almost left the Crows fairly much where they've been known. Well, that in itself probably is folly.
But the nonchalant blight attitude this year, Mick, do you think that's contrived, or is this just a sort of a bloke who's been in the coaching cape for a while and that's now the way he treats it?
I would have thought he coached this year almost identically what he has in the past. I've always found Malcolm to be a fairly laid-back character that obviously gets the maximum out of his players by the way he is, as opposed to be trying to be something different. I haven't seen Malcolm really lose control of the situation, and his approach is acceptable to the players. I mean, he's got a fairly good record.
He has.
In fact, it's a very good record.
Well, this is 4 grand finals in 7 seasons. I mean, that's fantastic.
He's actually won 6 of his last 7 finals matches. That's hard to do. Look, we'll take a break. We're going to look at the Saints forward line, Adelaide forward line, and some of the other key players after this break on Talking Footy.
Everybody's talking at me. Can't hear a word they say.
What'd you get?
Rabbit food. Again.
Me too. I think mine's still growing. You blokes want something from the shop? You bloody ripper.
Bloody unreal.
4 and 20. The taste Australians swear by.
These are the contenders for the Mitsubishi Motors Mark of the Year. Mark number 1, Tony Modra. Mark number 2, Daniel Harford. Mark number 3, Stuart Lowe. Mark number 4, Blake Carasella. Mark number 5, Adrian Fletcher. You could win a magnificent Mitsubishi Magna Executive V6 by recording your vote for the Mitsubishi Mark of the Year. The winning nominee and player will be announced at the end of the grand final.
Isn't this fun?
It's good to be bad. Face Off is not like any film you've ever seen. Travolta and Cage are perfect. Face Off.
This offer could be a lifesaver. Replace your shock absorbers with 4 new Pettis shocks and we'll give you a $35 electronic wheel alignment free. Get your free wheel alignment of Pettis suspension right here.
Monday on 7, from the blockbuster movie comes FX The Series.
How can I save your life?
I need you to make me a man.
Australia's Cameron Daddo stars as the movie's master of make-believe.
Impossible is not a word in Raleigh Tyler's vocabulary.
An expert of deception, illusion and special effects. And he's going to need every trick he knows just to stay alive.
You set me up for murder.
From the producers of RoboCop and MacGyver, the movie-length premiere Monday 8:30 and FX The Series starts Wednesday on 7.
Welcome back to Talking Footy, and our guest tonight on Grand Final Eve, Michael Malthouse, Premiership coach from West Coast Eagles. Do you think the Saints are the best offensive team in the comp? Figures say they are. Suggest they are. They've kicked more
they've
points.
got I think to be a very good offensive side, you've got to have a very good attacking midfield and complemented by a good back line. And then, of course, you've got to finish off. And they've pretty much
They've got 2 players who between them kicked over 65 goals, Everett and Smith gone. They're going to miss them, Everett particularly with his over the 40. Heatley's been the key, hasn't he, with 70. I mean, I've got to ask you, I mean, how surprised are you with his performance? He was at your club, left, was picked up in the national draft by the Saints and has been really the blooming star of the club late in the season.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. He's done very well. Jason, at the end of the year, was going to go back home. He wasn't on contract and he asked the club could that we organise a swap or a trade or whatever. And we had one club interested and they backed out. They said no. We said, what do you want to do? And he said, well, I'll just go in the draft. Is it okay? We said, yeah, well, you know, you want to go back home? Away you go.
But Mick, could you have seen enough of this bloke in 3 games of football? I'm not even sure he played 3 full games, but he kicked 8 goals in 3 games. He was a 100-goal kicker for Subiaco. Did you see enough of him at league level?
We thought so, yeah. I'm still not St Kilda get a lot of the football forward of inside the 50-metre line, far in excess of what the Eagles do.
But you have problems. It's not as if you've sort of got a Modra sitting in your goal square at West Coast.
No, we have got we've got players who play a similar role to him. And at the end of the day, you've got to make a judgmental thing. We've got, whatever happens tomorrow, we'll have 3 players who've left the football club and played in premierships. Doesn't matter who wins tomorrow. Dean Laidley, Matthew Clappe, and either Jason Heatley or Matthew Connell. Now, we don't get scared by making decisions because we try to make decisions for our football club and we're all on the same thing. If the player is a player's getting a lot of games, we would be very, very upset if he left the club. If a player doesn't get a lot of the football, a lot of games, none of us want to be sitting around with the Eagles 5 years down the track and the player saying, you didn't give us a chance. So we're quite prepared to trade players who can go on and play league football. Look, I left St Kilda and I had an opportunity to play in a premiership. I don't want to stand in anyone's way. But we also don't, you know, if we're going to trade players, we want to make sure that we get someone back that's going to help our club. We didn't see Jason as a 70-goal forward. Now he's kicked them and it's been a fantastic effort.
But you must be disappointed, though, that there seems to be bad blood between you and he. I don't know if there's any reason for it or not, or whether it's a misunderstanding, but there is a perception that you and he are at odds with each other.
Yeah, I don't know where they come from. Well, I haven't seen Jason for some time at Bidley. The last time I think he kicked 3 or 4 goals against us it may have been more goals against us at Subiaco, but you don't mix with the players these days because they get on a bus and go home and that's it. But that's the only, well, there was no contact that day. So I don't know where it comes from, but perhaps you might do an interview and might find out.
The forward line, where Heatley's become the key for the Saints. I mean, where are the other strengths, do you think, and how might they match
Well,
up?
I think Heatley has been their main multiple goal kicker, but the ability for he and Stuart Leigh to basically alternate between full forward and centre half forward, I mean, I think that's the great strength, that they're both sort of goal kicking forwards, but they can both play up the ground at centre half forward or back at full forward. And Barry Hall, I suppose, quite often is the third marking option. Sometimes he may not even be there, but I think we know what a consistently good mark Stuart Lowe is, and that's the thing I think's impressed me about Heatley. He's played full forward and kicked goals at times, but he's come up the field and looked quite comfortable across half forward.
Leigh, Stuart Lowe will probably get Peter Caven as an opponent, I suspect, to start with. Peter Caven is 6 centimetres shorter and 21 kilos lighter. Is it possible?
Well, yeah, that's the balance. I would suspect that if Pittman plays in the ruck, there's a fair chance that Pittman will drop back to half back, and every now and again might just go next to Lowe and let Caven take off. Of course, I think the ability of the St Kilda forwards to mark the ball is going to be critical, because if they don't mark it, then that running Adelaide defence is going to charge out, which is why I think Andrew Thompson I've put in as the small forward, because he's a very important player. We see the run out here of the Crows, and that's been their strength. They've prevented the opposition kicking goals, partly because they run out so aggressively that they drag all the forwards out of position quite often.
Mick, what do you think that Caven will get Low?
Oh, I'm certain he'll get Low. I think he's had an exceptional year. Caven, he's been terrific for them. I just think that at the end of the day, they may well view the St Kilda rucks as adequate, but not going to be damaging, so therefore they can afford to have their ruckman fall back and attack off that line. And that being the case, then they get a 7-man back line, in which will obviously put enormous pressure on the St Kilda forward.
But isn't it, to me, this is the layman's view, Sean Wren is the best ruckman, almost as good as any going around on his form of the last 2 weeks and what we knew of him before. Would you not put him in and try to exploit where St Kilda is most vulnerable, in the centre square?
That's certainly the choice, one of the choices.
But that's what I'm saying, though, that he could play there. I mean, Sean Wren's going to show up most ruck in the competition, that he can jump over them and punch the ball out. But young Cook did pretty well last week. I thought he competed extremely well. Sierakowski is such a hard player that he might win a lot of the ball around the ground.
And you can imagine having having Wren and Pittman at various times in the centre square against Cook, maybe Sierakowski. They've got to have the advantage, certainly in size, if they're keeping a fresh, jumping centre bounce ruckman.
Don't you feel, though, that it seems the odds on that to have 3 ruckmen, that Wren would be the logical key forward?
Yeah,
given that Keating's still on the side.
That's the point. What will they do with Keating? Is he the 21st man, or do you think he'll actually play a vital part from the start?
Well, they've got 3 ruck types. I think Keating is probably a ruckman, but Wren we know can play forward and ruck, and Pittman can play defence as well as ruck.
So what would you do with Keating? Would you start him on the bench or throw him right in there?
Well, I've sort of got him on the bench. I mean, what will Malcolm do? But I've got him on the bench.
You'd start with your best ruckman, the way I see it.
And I too had Smart at full back. That's another question. Where do we put do Adelaide put Smart in the forward line? I've actually think he's the best matchup for Heatley, and got Jamison. I think Jamison or Smart. You would think one of those two will be in the forward line. I've kept with the selected side and kept Jamison up there, and Smart back on Heatley. And I think Smart is the type of player who could really have the best chance of keeping Heatley to an ordinary game.
You've got McLeod on Thompson there.
Well, I think Thompson, as I say, Thompson is critical because he is the St Kilda crumbing forward who gets to the front of the pack. He's the chaser, the tackler, the pressurer. Rod Keogh plays that role a little bit as well, and those players are really important when you've got marking forwards, because they can't mark it 15 times a game. And Matthew Lappin plays a bit of a similar role, but just have a look at the way Thompson, he breaks his stride to get to the front of the pack, and I think he plays a really important role in that forward 50. I mean, it's spoken of that he could be a possibility to, say, tag Jarman, but I think as a forward, he's been an excellent player.
Mick, if Stan Elves is convinced that the Crows will play the 3 big blokes, does he then have to have a look at the way he's set up? I mean, is it possible that Robbie Neal goes off the bench and a taller bloke comes into the 21?
Oh, I wouldn't have thought so. I think they've got it covered pretty well. They've got Sierakowski or Cook and play ruck. They know that Sheahan would logically pick up Wren if he plays full forward, and they can cover it.
And Michael, what about McLeod? Where would you play him if you were Malcolm Blight? He was impacted so heavily in the second half.
Well, if 4 goals down, I know where I'd play him. Forward, like he did last week in the middle or thereabouts, because he's just such an exciting player. But again, he's played so well for him on the back line. Why would you early on, You can't become too smart in grand finals.
Do you think, as a principle, Malcolm will go with what's got them to, say, the preliminary final rather than what got them the win in the last half?
I would have thought so. Stick with what the players know best as well.
The goal kickers in the finals have been interesting. I mean, no surprise for the Saints. They've only played 2 finals. Heatley and Lowe have got the heavy goals. The Crows have played 1 extra, and really nobody's done a whole lot. You'll see Smart there, and actually Jamison and McLeod have both got 2 as well, and Hart's got goals. I think they're going to have to get goals from the half-back and full-back line almost, the Jamison, Smarts, McLeods and Harts, to make up the numbers.
I'm sure they'll bob up in the forward 50 at times. We did an interesting stat today. We just averaged out what the average number of goals has been kicked this year by every player in both teams. Like, for instance, Darren Jarman is averaging 1.4. Add all those averages up, the Crows kick about 8.5 goals.
St
Kilda kick 13.9.
Yeah.
And that's because Modra obviously is averaging 4. Well, he's out of the side, even though he hasn't been kicking his 4, we know that. So, I mean, just the St Kilda scoring power does just look capable of being higher.
We're going to look at that Adelaide forward line after this break and just see where they might squeeze those goals up. They need more than 8.5, I think, to have a real chance. We'll take a break. We'll be back with more after this.
Everybody's talking at me. I can't hear a word they're saying.
You bloody ripper. Bloody unreal.
4 and 20. The taste Australians swear by.
Our prices aren't steep. They're cheap. Men's linen cotton pants, $35. Women's striped tops, $15. Men's zip polos, only $20. Women's wrap skirts, $25. Men's striped polos, $20. Women's dresses, $20 and $25. JJ's basic jeans, $25. Hey,
Check out these great Radio Reynolds Home Starter combo deals. Rent a medium washer, dryer and 310 litre fridge, under $20 a week the combo. 48cm TV, 2-head VCR and futon, under $20 the combo. 48cm TV, 220 litre fridge and medium washer, under $20 the combo. And there's no deposit, easy approval, free delivery and free service. Just call 131 181.
Want to capture exciting new colours? Then next time use the world's best films for colour. Introducing new Kodak Gold with Kodak's patented colour technology towards true colour today. If you want this kind of colour, put this film in your camera.
Who combined butter and canola oil to create Extra Soft, the dairy blend that spreads like margarine, straight from the fridge. Devondale.
Critics agree. Speed 2 is spectacular. It never stops moving.
You better hang on.
Siskel and Ebert give it 2 thumbs up. Sandra Bullock sparkles in the role that made her a star.
I'm driving now.
Joel Siegel says it's hold your breath action. An edge of your seat must-see thrill ride. Speed 2 Cruise Control.
Oops. See what you made me do.
Seven's putting the heartbeat back into Saturday nights.
At 6:30, journey through the English countryside that inspired the scenes of the hit series. From the spectacular castles to traditional townships, it's all in the search of the perfect English village.
Then at 7:30, Heartbeat's home on 7.
I'm beginning to feel like I'm part of something here.
Starring Nick Berry and a great cast of colourful characters.
Into uniform, there's work to be done.
Heartbeat, right after the world around us perfect English villages from 6:30 Saturday on 7.
Once again, welcome back to Talking Footy. We're about to look at the Adelaide forward line and just how Leigh thinks they may line up. And you've started Wren in the forward line here. You've got Bon across, halfway between half forward and the pocket, and Jamison. So a couple of surprises.
Well, like, I was going, I suppose, with what Mick was suggesting, that Jamison has probably played full forward line marking target quite often. He's played defence more often, we know that, but I think he might be the one they have to put up there. And Wren, of course, gives the height in the forward line, and Wren is one of those very, very few very tall ruckman who can actually mark the ball in the forward line as well, which makes him a dangerous target. And wonder if he'll come out with his knee brace on or off.
It was symbolic, wasn't it?
Off, I think. I think he's going to come off. He looked a different player with it off, didn't he? He looked lighter, fitter. Will Sheahan follow him wherever he is? Do you think, will he go right up the ground? If Wren plays at centre half forward, will Sheahan play at centre half back?
Quite possibly. It's interesting that we haven't discussed this centre half forward. I think Robert, so much depends on him having a big game.
We're going to get to
Robin. But certainly Wren, I mean, if he could sort of play all over the place, but that's why I punted that without his height in the forward line, I think Adelaide's sort of marking power up forward just looks a bit fragile. I mean, Maldred's not that tall, we know, but you know he's going to jump at the pack at the full forward line more than anyone else can. And Wren's height up there I thought was critical. Jamison at full forward. Hudson I thought would probably take him. And of course, as Mick mentioned, Robin at centre half forward. It's pretty hard to win a grand final unless your centre half forward is at least competitive.
You've got to get one or the other playing very well, full forward or centre half forward.
Where's he at? He's kicked 4 goals in his last 8 matches. One of them was this, bomb. 4 in 8, and he kicked 20 in his first 10. So he's averaging a half a goal a match in his last 8.
But he was very good, wasn't he? When he came back, he had a late start to the season. And then when he got back in, I think he played 8 games. He really looked like he'd arrived, didn't he? This bloke that had potential finally looked like he'd blossomed, and it's disappeared as quickly as it came.
Yeah, it's an interesting line. Adelaide have been known for their amount of goals they can kick. Modra out of the side, it throws it around a little bit to see if someone can jump up. Jamison kicked 6 against Essendon and looked very good kicking the 6, so perhaps someone has to kick.
Interesting point
5
too.
6.
The centre Wakeland had said Darryl Wakeland centre half back. I mean, centre half back most of the year everyone thought was a vulnerable position for St Kilda, but of course Wakeland went there and did very well on Wayne Carey last week, no doubt about that. But actually him playing, whether playing on Carey last week and playing well. I know you're going into a grand final, you take nothing for granted, but maybe he just thinks, well, Robin's not as good as Carey. That's something I think you'd have to be careful about, not to underestimate Robin, because on his day he can be very good.
We're looking at Wakeland playing very well here, but going back, Michael, to Robin and Malcolm Blight's use of him last week, he refused to bring him on until basically the last minute of the match. I don't know.
I thought he must have been injured, quite frankly. I was a bit surprised, I suppose, that he did it, but he obviously had faith in the players out there. One of the things about St Kilda, which puts enormous pressure on the opposition, is the ability of their midfield to work into their backline. Burke and Harvey are regularly picking up the loose football or the hand pass from their backline player under siege. There's an outlet valve all the time to either Burke or Harvey, and it's almost like having 8 players on your backline. And because they're so good at working forward, they can always get forward and then get back again.
You'd love Berkey, wouldn't you? I mean, Nathan Burke's your sort of player, isn't he? He's probably every coach's sort of player.
Can I have Harvey as well? Either one of those.
But the two, I suppose, a bit underrated is their small defenders. Peckett and Zilla, I think, have both been very good. There's not too many of the smaller crumbing forwards. I mean, whether Zilla takes Bond, Peckett may take Rintoul, and I just had Allen, who's the other half forward with Cripps. But they've been very good, Peckett and Zilla. They've got no problems if they have to come up and play wing because the defensive or the forward line doesn't quite suit their size. They've been very good, and they're all both quick, and they carry the ball out of the defensive 50 well.
Yeah, I think Zilla would be the player that you'd put on the most elusive forward. Peckett's the player that generally would play on the bloke who you can work a little bit off. I think we found out last week when they had to do the shift.
Yeah, and Bond's been pretty good, and hasn't he? I mean, Bond's had a good final series. Do you think Zilla might get him?
Yeah, I think Bond's the type of player that Zilla would pick up.
Yep.
As Mick said, that kind of crumbing forward. Although Bond does mark the ball fairly well for a little fella.
What about the finishing power of both these teams? The Crows' last quarters have been great in the final series. Really impressive. They've come home over the top of every team they've played against. And St Kilda's third quarters have been just brilliant, and their last halves generally have been very good. I mean, are these facts, are they, Michael? I mean, look at Adelaide. I know they had slightly the scoring in with you. They possibly did with Geelong, but they're impressive performances, aren't they? Last quarter efforts in pressure matches.
I think it's important to be fresh, and they've got 2 of those games were home.
Yep.
And it was a terrific effort against Footscray or Western Bulldogs.
Yeah.
So I don't think anyone really expected that. But it's important to be fresh and have fresh legs that you can interchange players through. And I think it's significant that against Western Bulldogs, they were able to change their midfield virtually right around and introduce players who'd played at one end of the ground, so therefore didn't have the same running a requirement, and of course they were reasonably fresh. Whereas St Kilda have relied very heavily on the same set of players week in, week out. Now, the pressure may go onto those blokes.
Third quarter is often talked about as a premiership quarter. In 92, it certainly worked for you. I know you charged it Geelong before half-time, but you won it in the third. Look at the Saints in the third quarters in the two finals. I mean, Brisbane was tremendous, but North Melbourne was so impressive last week, wasn't it? They just crunched them in the third, didn't they? Put them away.
Yeah, that's when the match was sort of put out of contention, really, wasn't it, by three-quarter time?
Yeah, it's not only their scoring power, it's their stopping power as well. Brisbane had 3 shots and North Melbourne had 2, so it's important that if you're going to score, you stop the opposition. Say he's kicking 6 goals and they kick 5 or 4.
Mick, when they played against you in Perth and did so well, did you think they were a team of this sort of quality?
We went in with a fairly depleted team, and they broke open the game pretty much by half time. We struggled, and we got back. In fact, we got in front just before three-quarter time, and the good sign, I suppose, for St Kilda's point of view was that they were able to weather that storm and come over the top of us, because we did get the incentive or the initiative midway through that third quarter, and they took that from us. So it was a big win, particularly coming over there. It was their first win in Western Australia, so that's fairly significant too. It gives the side and the coach and everyone else a bit of confidence.
We might try and come to some conclusions after the break. It's not going to be all that easy. I hope you're enjoying it. We'll be back with Talking Footy after this.
I won't let you leave.
Hello, ahead in the news, the Prime Minister rallies the troops after a horrible week. 200 people feared dead in a Garuda crash, and footy fever hits Melbourne.
What'd you get?
Rabbit food. Again.
Me too. I think mine's still growing. You blokes want something from the shop?
You bloody ripper. Bloody unreal.
4 and 20. The taste Australians swear by.
These are the contenders for the Mitsubishi Motors Mark of the Year. Mark number 1, Tony Modra. Mark number 2, Daniel Harford. Mark number 3, Stuart Lowe. Mark number 4, Blake Carosella. Mark number 5, Adrian Fletcher. You could win a magnificent Mitsubishi Magna Executive V6 by recording your vote for the Mitsubishi Mark of the Year. The winning nominee and player will be announced at the end of the grand final.
Fisher & Paykel multifunction built-in ovens have a delay start, a self-cleaning option, easy clean soft touch controls, and a large interior with fast heat up time.
It's a lovely day.
When you're determined to cut out smoking, Nicorette, the world's #1 nicotine gum, is proven to help you cut out your cravings. Day by day, craving by craving. Nicorette. Enjoy life without cigarettes.
We believe everyone should have the opportunity to present themselves professionally.
Now everyone can afford the quality, clarity and feel of plain paper with the Brother 1020 fax.
Do you want to read this before I send it?
Saturday, it's down to the best 2 teams, and the world will be watching. The Adelaide Crows versus St Kilda. The 97 AFL Grand Final, live 2 o'clock Saturday on 7.
Footy's home ground.
And this is the mini version of what they're playing for tomorrow. Commemorative Cup, the AFL 1997 Premiership Cup. 2 of the men here know all about it as players and coaches, Leigh Matthews and Michael Malthouse. But let's start with you, Mike. I mean, after having a look at the teams and seeing them for 5-6 months, who do you think will win?
I think the Saints will win, Bruce. I've come around to the thinking now that the best team over 5 months is not there by chance. It's earned its spot at the top of the ladder, and that's where St Kilda was. And I think they'll win. The wild card to me is Wren. I think he should start in the centre square, and if he does actually run amok for the first 15 minutes, that'll put St Kilda back on its heels.
Leigh?
Yeah, I'm sticking with the Saints. I think even though they've probably got a bit of a deficiency in the ruck, and even if Wren dominates the ruck, I mean, they can drop Harvey to the back of the centre square to sort of bolster the half-back line a bit. But I think the whole midfield group of St Kilda looks pretty strong, and I think their scoring power looks a lot stronger. than the Crows. I just don't fancy the Crows' chances to kick more than sort of 12 goals, and you know, it's hard to, you can win with 12 goals, but going in, I think the Saints look the logical favourites.
You going to disagree, Mickey, or not? Who do you like?
Well, I've got a soft spot for St Kilda having played there, and I also believe, you know, having like to see Adelaide do well. I just suspect that the side that settles down the quickest and is able to maintain that ascendancy, I think can win the game. Now, they've got the midfield to win it, St Kilda, and I think it'll be a very close game. But if it's damp, I think that St Kilda win pretty well.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, because I just think they've got a very good record in that sort of condition. But if it's an open game, don't be surprised to see, as Leigh said, that running back line of Adelaide doing some damage.
So the Saints are the favourites here. That's our last Talking Footy for this year. There's no Talking Footy on Saturday night. There's so much football coming up. Just check your local guides. Michael, thank you for coming in tonight.
My pleasure.
Good luck next year. Leigh, it's been a real pleasure, and you too, Mick. And I want to sign you up for next year if I can. Right now, join us on 7 for all the footy. We'll leave you with the scenes from Treasury Place after today's big parade.
Go on, wish them all the best of luck tomorrow.
I don't care what you say, only the echoes of my mind.